Joining us now on the Dan Patch Show, Albert Breer of the Monday Morning Quarterback and NBC Sports Boston. Albert, thanks for joining us on short notice today. Where do you think the NFL is right now? Are they meeting? Are they having discussions? Is there a statement being prepared on the direction of the roughing the passer penalty in the NFL?
Well, I mean, you guys' first problem is that you're trying to analyze what Jerry's saying. And I just tell you from having covered the Cowboys 10 years ago, Jerry says lots of things. And you're going to tie yourself in a pretzel if you're trying to break down and line up every single one of them.
Fair enough.
I just tell you, I think the NFL, and especially, I'd say over the last 6 or 7 years, has been very rabbit-eared. And, they've been reactionary to things. And there's a huge part of what got them in this mess in the first place, is that this rule, the bodyweight rule, was put in as a reaction to a singular event. And that event, of course, was the Anthony Barr hit on Aaron Rodgers last year. Unfortunately, because they're going kind of, overboard trying to protect the quarterback, they didn't think of the consequences on the other end. And I'll tell you what, I sent out texts to about a dozen defensive coaches last night asking, how do you coach this? How do you deal with this? And it's, the response I got back is, it's just there are things you can do to try and coach guys to tackle a certain way and take a quarterback down a certain way. But the bottom line is that, they've made the strike zone so small now that, if a guy's moving at that speed into another person and aiming for an area, there are inevitably going to be unavoidable hits, unavoidable situations where the momentum of the defensive player is going to carry him on top of the offensive player. And that's, in fact, one of them, I asked one of these guys, a defensive coordinator, I asked, what about the Clay Matthews hit? And he's like, I don't know how to coach that out of someone. And this is an NFL defensive coordinator. And so, I don't know how much of the stuff that I heard, and this was sort of an informal polling last night, but I don't know how much of, what I heard last night from these defensive coaches has gone up the flagpole to the league office. But certainly they've got a problem, and now the question becomes, do they react to the bad PR on a rule that was a reaction to bad PR or a reaction to a bad situation? That's the hard thing, because it's, again, this is where the NFL has gotten itself in trouble traditionally in the past.
Albert, is there a way to walk back the rule without making an announcement to sort of subtly communicate to the officials, hey, just cut it down by 25%? How do they do that?
Well, I mean, if you look at the rule the way it was written, Andrew, they turned an and in there into or, and this rule initially had been that it was either I don't have it in front of me. It was like an unnecessary violent, going at a player in an unnecessarily violent way and landing on top of the guy with all your body weight. And they subtly changed the and to or, and that got lost in all the hoopla over the helmet rule. And I don't know that any of us predicted it was going to be the problem that it has been. I would suggest going back to the way it was. I don't know if they can do that. It'd be difficult, of course, in the middle of the season. I can't think of much of a precedent for it to change a rule back like that. But I think one thing they could do is they could tell the officials, hey, if a guy picks up a guy and pile drives him, then yeah, sort of flag. It's one of those things where when you see it. But if if the contact is, fair, and it looks like the fact that the guy landed with his body weight on top of the other player was incidental, then make a judgment call and let some of that stuff go. Because I don't think anybody, and I don't think the league, when they made the rule what it is now, I don't think the league intended for hits like the two Clay Matthews hits over the last couple of weeks to be the stuff that was going to get called.
Hey, Albert, why do you think there isn't a current active NFL player on the competition committee to see in real time how the players would react to rules and get a person who's currently playing instead of a guy who's been retired for 10 years?
I've never thought about that. That's a great idea. That's a really good idea. But I think that's part of the problem with the league in general is that they, and this is, God, we could talk for 3 hours about this.
Let's do it.
The relationship between the league and the players has been fractured for a long time. And this is the way that they've operated. And it's unfortunate, and this is the little stuff that really ticks the players off, and you can line it up with the anthem issue. The fact that no one in that room in May thought when they were putting the new anthem rule in that, hey, we should call the union, or, hey, maybe we should have invited a half dozen players to sit in here in the room with us. The fact that they didn't think of that, tells you everything you need to know about why the league's relationship with the players is where it is. And that's another one of this would be another one of those, where it's like what you just said, I hadn't even thought of it. And the reason I hadn't even thought of it is because that's not the way the leagues operate.
Right.
And it'd be such an easy common sense thing to put a couple, maybe put two offensive players and two defensive players, in the room with them when they're doing their meetings in February, or at the combine with them, or at the owners' meetings with them. Makes all the sense in the world. It's just that the relationship between the players in the league and the players and the owners hasn't been there really, anytime recently. And I think not only that would that help in a situation like this one, I think it would also probably help, from a global standpoint, to make the players feel a little bit more like partners, which I think would go a long way to repairing the relationship.
Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback at NBC Sports Boston, joining us on the Dan Patrick Show. Moving down to Tampa, what are the long-term ramifications? We know short-term, Dirk Cutter wants to win games, and will probably go with Ryan Fitzpatrick as starting quarterback. But if they stick with Fitzpatrick for the foreseeable future, what is the money issue, the signing issue to keep Jameis Winston on that team, or jettison him and move on from him?
Well, they don't really have honestly, there's not much logistically that would prevent them from moving on from him after this year outside of injury. If he's hurt and he can't pass a physical in March, that was the risk in picking up his option, and so, that's, if he's injured, then, you're on the hook for the $20 million. If he's healthy, if he gets to the end of the season healthy, then you don't need to do anything, And so I actually don't think that this is – and look, no one's going to say that Dirk Cutter and Jason Light and all those guys, their jobs are on the line. No one's going to say that's not the case, right? So, I actually look at this as sort of a halfway positive development for them. And here's what I mean. I think there are three outcomes here as long as you stick with Fitz. It's one, you ride the hot hand and Fitz brings you to the playoffs. So that's number one. That's a positive development. That saves everybody's job. Two, Jameis gets, Jameis is really motivated behind Fitz, does all of the right things. And, then Fitz, it takes a wrong turn in November, and you got to go to Jameis, and you're getting the very best out of Jameis, who at that point is playing for his career. And maybe that saves your jobs. And then the third one is, that Jameis doesn't take this as seriously as he should, and Fitz doesn't play well, and then Jameis comes in and he doesn't play well either, and everyone gets fired, which I think would have been the case anyway if Jameis didn't play well this year, and at least then the organization has a answer on Jameis, and if the answer is that he's just not very good after 4 years, then everyone was getting fired anyway, because that's what happens when you draft a guy number one overall and you strike out on him. So I actually look at this and I say to myself, in a weird way, you can lay out three conclusions, and, those three conclusions you can logically say, well, the one bad one, is inevitable anyway if you strike out on a quarterback that high in the draft, and the other two might save the guys' jobs.
Albert, final 2 minutes. I got one topic I want to ask you about is the Earl Thomas situation, the Pro Bowl safety out in Seattle. He's basically wagging the dog out there. He knows that they need him for any chance to have a decent defense, and he's going to practice when he wants. Can you see this being a watershed moment where players use every move they have to negotiate with the team? Le'Veon Bell says, I'm just not going to play. Earl Thomas says, I'll practice when I want and play because I know you need me. Are they changing the direction of negotiations in the league?
It's, I don't think so, because there aren't very many players who have the capital to do this sort of thing. And Le'Veon Bell made $12 million last year. Granted, he wasn't a first-round pick. He's a second-round pick. And so the money he made his first 4 years wasn't great, but he does have some money in the bank. Earl Thomas, was a first-round pick and then signed a top-of-the-market second contract. So he's got the money to pull off something like this. It's a lot harder if you're a down-the-roster guy who's, looking to get his second contract. And David Johnson, I think, will be a good example of it. Like Todd Gurley's in the same draft class as David Johnson. Todd Gurley could legitimately threaten to hold out because he's made a lot of money already. And so, the Rams move on him and get the deal done. The one piece of leverage the Cardinals had over David Johnson was, they pretty much knew because he was a fourth-round pick, David Johnson isn't going to be sitting out anything. Like David Johnson isn't going to walk away from the money we're paying him because he hasn't made that much already. And that's the way the vast majority of players, that's the position that the vast majority of players are in. And so, could it affect top-of-the-market negotiations with guys who have already made money? Sure it could. If it works for Earl Thomas, if it works for Le'Veon Bell, sure, I could see some certain other players following suit, even though the cost is really, really high to do something like that under the current CBA rules. The thing is that guys that are in that position, that represents a very small percentage of the league. So I don't know that it's really going to have some sort of widespread effect on the rank-and-file NFL player.
Albert, final 30 seconds. You cover the Patriots as much as any reporter in the NFL. Which would you bet on? If you had to make a bet on one of these two extremes, the Patriots miss the playoffs or the Patriots win the Super Bowl? You can only pick one.
I've just seen it too many times. You know what I mean? Like,
you seen this movie?
I've seen this movie before. This is, there are a lot of really bad signs through 3 weeks, and not the least of which is that opening day win, which looked great when they went on September 9th. Now doesn't look the same because Houston's 0-3, and so doesn't look like there's a ton around Brady right now. Now they'll get Edelman back, and they hope they can get something out of Josh Gordon, and that'll change everything. But the defense still looks old and slow. The offense still has holes, and you have to wonder if some of the bad history from last year starts to rear its head if things kind of continue down the path they're going. But if I had to put my money on it, I don't know how anybody could say that they won't, that it's hard to see a way for them to figure it out because they figured it out so many times in the past. And I think it's sort of a fool's bet to go against Belichick and Brady at this point.
Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback, NBC Sports. Thanks for joining us on the Dan Patrick Show.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.